What's up, family? Welcome in. Hit the like, share, and subscribe button. This is Mdu Ntchr. Today we're going to be talking about the Dendera Lights. I am going to be looking to start around the 6-minute mark. As for now, I will leave you with the war drums. In the meantime, before I get started, hit the like, share, subscribe button. Again, I am going to start at the 6-minute mark, so stay tuned. There's a lot of good information that I'm going to be getting into. Welcome in. Hit the like, share, and subscribe button. We're going to be getting started here momentarily. What's up, family? Hit the like, share, and subscribe button. I'm going to get started in a couple of seconds. What's up, family? Once again, we are here. This time around, we are going to be discussing the Dendera Lights. Tonight, it's not only about the Dendera Light, it is about reclaiming inquiry, restoring intellectual agency, and recognizing the transformative power of STEM for the Black race in historically marginalized communities, STEM is more than just academic disciplines. STEM is an instrument of liberation. Technology builds independence. Knowledge breaks dependency. Innovation disrupts systems that have long limited our opportunities and controlled our narratives. The Dendera Light stands at the center of this controversy. For generations, mainstream interpretations have often relied on rigid standards of proof, unnecessary smoking guns, while dismissing alternative frameworks and prima facie evidence that emerged from visual, symbolic, and technological analysis. Now you will learn to examine and recognize the Dendera Light as a real piece of technology through our ancestors' figurative teachings. And that's why this conversation matters. Right now, I'm going to start off with a mainstream archaeologist's interpretation of the Dendera Light mural. I want you to pay attention very closely. I want you to take note of the words that he chooses.
The Dendera Light. Is it really a light bulb? If not, what is it? Really, in the Temple of Hathor in Dendera, Egypt, are several panels with images of what appears to be a light bulb held by ancient Egyptians. Admittedly, the image does have the appearance of a light bulb, and it was probably Eric von Daniken that first suggested this is a light bulb, possibly in his 1996 book, The Eyes of the Sphinx.
Heute möchte ich einige Fragen aufwerfen und Antworten anbieten, die ganz bestimmt zu Kontroversen führen. Wie erleuchteten die alten Ägypter eigentlich ihre Oder? Ich bin ein Mann mit ketzerischen Gedanken. Kannten die alten Ägypter gar so etwas wie elektrisches Licht?
On page 172, he describes a panel on the north wall of Crypt 1C of the temple as having what can easily be imagined as a bulb with a socket and a wire leading to a junction box and an insulator, while a baboon with knives symbolizes the danger of electricity to the uninitiated. This may or may not be the first time one of the 5 or so panels showing this lotus snake bulb configuration was associated with light bulb, but much has been made of it since. And I have to admit, von Daniken is right. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to see what he describes. It looks like a couple of guys holding a big light bulb or a flashlight. Regardless of the imagination, logic and reason tell us that this cannot be a light bulb. The technology to power a light bulb wasn't invented until thousands of years later. Looking closer, we can see the individual elements that are mentioned even by von Daniken. The lotus flower, the snake, the jed pillar, the people, and the anthropomorphic figure of the baboon. And if we leave the rest to imagination and von Daniken, we probably see the light bulb as well. However, it is very interesting to note what von Daniken leaves out. The image he includes in his book is a sketch of the panel, very much like the one you see here. What he leaves out is contextually relevant, which is the rest of the panel, including the writing which describes the scene we're looking at. So rather than simply use our imaginations, we can just read what the ancient Egyptians had to say. Speaking the words of Harsumptus, the great god, who dwells in Dendera, who emerges out of the lotus flower as a living Ba, whose completeness is elevated by the Kamatju images of his Ka, whose Sashemu image is revered by the crew of the day barge, whose body is carried by the jed pillar, underneath his Seshemu image is the primal, and whose majesty is carried by the companions of his Ka. Gold. Height, 1 cubit. So as we can see, the Dendera Light is not a light bulb at all, but a representation of Harsumptis, or Horus, who is emerging from the lotus flower. But look back at this line drawing of the panel, and think of the words again. Revered by the crew of the day barge. The human figures in the image that are sitting, kneeling, and standing are actually on the deck of a barge, a ship, the hull of which curls around and forms the lotus flower. And from this flower emerges Horus as the serpent, held up by the Jed pillar, a symbol of stability often associated with the creator god Ptah and with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. A Jed pillar is a representation of the spine of Osiris, and if you notice the sections and the shape, it actually has the appearance of the vertebrae of a human spine. But notice in the translation of the text I read, there are references to the Kamatju and Seshemu images. These were probably referring to actual statues of Harsumptis, Horus, which were stored in this very vault. The murals on the wall and their accompanying texts are descriptions and inventories for items stored here and instructions on their use. Oh, and what about our little monkey friend? He actually has the face of a toad and is a guardian demon. The text next to him reads, "Your name is perfect as Wepwe. Your face is that of a toad. I have slaughtered your enemies with the knife, and I will fall your opponent in the place of execution." So he's not a warning about electricity. The Jed pillar isn't an insulator, and the cable is a barge. Take a look at some other examples of ancient Egyptian barges and notice the shape along with the curled hull coalescing into a lotus. So he's not a warning about electricity. And the Jed pillar, that isn't an insulator. We know this isn't a light bulb, not just because the technology didn't exist yet, but because the Egyptian priests and caretakers of the temple tell us what it really means. By the way, the translation I drew from is from a paper by Wolfgang Weitges, The Birth of Harsumptis from the Blossom on the Significance and Function of Some Cult Objects in the Temple of Dendera. You can find it in a journal called The Studies in Ancient Egyptian Culture. I'll make sure there's a link to the paper through JSTOR in the description below.
So as you can see, he didn't really touch on a lot. His analysis of the mural was very brief. It left out the engineers. Right off the jump, he incorrectly gave credit to Von Donigan for coming up with the name of the Dendera Light. So right off the bat, he was incorrect about that. And he also ignored the electrical engineers' analysis and experiment, and we're going to get into that later. Speaking of engineers, we are going to next watch a brief clip from an electrical technician's analysis of the Dendera Light.
The Dendera Light. Is it really a light bulb? If not,
The Dendera Light and the Electric Universe. Ancient Egyptian technology reveals lost secrets of plasma cosmology. Hello, my name is William Armand Sosa, and I am an electronics technician, software engineer, and lost ancient technology researcher. In this brief presentation, I intend to share my research into lost ancient technology and the discoveries I've made regarding the knowledge and use of electricity and magnetism in ancient times, discoveries that led me to the electric universe. The Dendera Light. The Dendera Light is an ancient electrical device over 2,000 years old. Several images of the device were found in Egypt, at the temple complex in Dendera. The temple complex was built during the Ptolemaic period around 360 BC, on the site of a much older temple built in the 18th dynasty around 1500 BC. 6 of these devices are located in the main temple, dedicated to the goddess Hathor, and 1 is located in a smaller temple, behind the main temple dedicated to the goddess Isis. These devices are found exclusively at Dendera and nowhere else. In 1982, Austrian authors Peter Krause and Reinhard Habeck, together with Austrian electrical engineer Walter Garn, first wrote about the device in their book, Light of the Pharaoh. The first replica of the device, a simple plasma tube, was constructed by Garn and featured in an Eric von Däniken video some years later. Conspicuously missing from Garn's replica was the power source for the device. How did the ancient Egyptians generate electricity? In their research, Krause and Habeck addressed the power issue and were confident that they had found the solution in the Baghdad battery technology. They understood that the ancient battery, found in Iraq, produced electricity, and simply concluded that the ancient Egyptians powered their electrical devices with a similar technology. But did the ancient Egyptians actually use a Baghdad battery to power the Dendera Light, as Krause and Habeck proposed? As an electronics technician, I was a bit skeptical and felt the issue needed more research. I knew the Baghdad battery was the key to solving this ancient puzzle, to unlocking the secrets of Egyptian technology, the Radio Shack method. When I was a kid, my Uncle Joe gave me a Radio Shack 65-in-1 electronics project kit. This thing was great, an electronics course in a cardboard box, full of electrical components and, most importantly, a fully illustrated instruction manual. This book had it all. A short summary and illustration of each project, a step-by-step list of instructions on how to build the project, a schematic diagram of the electronic circuit and components, and a complete explanation of how the electronic circuit worked, along with a cartoon of the components describing their function in the circuit. Stick a pin in this image. We'll come back to it later. Code. And in 1995, deep in the pages of an ancient Egyptian art book, I found it. The Rosetta Stone of Egyptian technology. I knew immediately when I saw this photo that the ancient power source I was looking for was there, somewhere. I just had to find it. This photo was exactly what I needed to crack the technology code. An ancient Egyptian version of the Radio Shack How It Works section, complete with a picture language describing the information in an easy-to-understand and comprehend graphic form, and a written language describing the same information in a more complex or technical form. I could not read the written language, the hieroglyphics, so I put it aside to translate and decipher another day. But the picture language I recognized immediately. It was the language of electrical technology. I began my analysis by parsing the photo into 3 sections or scenes. The center contained a very interesting electrical device that I called the giant Minot necklace machine, which turned out to be a high-voltage Tesla coil. However, we will bypass this part for now, since a complete analysis of this device is beyond the scope of this brief presentation. The Sistrum Crotalum and the Waz Scepter. In these 2 sections, we see a similar scene. I will focus on the scene on the right. Here we see a priestess sitting in a chair, holding a Waz scepter. The Waz scepter is a common symbol found in Egyptian art and is known as the rod of power. Next, we see a young boy holding a device in his outstretched hand, known as the Hathor Sistrum Crotalum, a ritual rattle or musical instrument often used in temple ceremonies and festivals. The boy's name is Ihi, the son of the goddess Hathor, and the walls speak of him using the Sistrum Crotalum to bring energy to the priestess in the chairs. You'll notice that the priestess is wearing a solar headdress, which I identified earlier as a plasma tube, an electrical device. I had been looking for the power source for the solar headdress for some time, and it was in this photo that I finally found it, which is why I refer to this photo as the Rosetta Stone of ancient technology. The Sistrum Crotalum is an electrical device that works in conjunction with the Waz scepter to produce a high-voltage electric current. These devices are found all over Egypt and are used to power various electrical devices like the solar headdress and the Dendera Light. Basically, what we have here is a simple electric circuit, where the Waz scepter is the switch, the sistrum crotalum is the power source, the solar headdress is the light bulb, and the pedestal is a common ground, electrically connecting the two people through their feet, thereby making a complete electrical circuit. In this scene, we have a closed circuit. Notice the Waz scepter making contact with the sistrum crotalum. And in this scene, we have an open circuit. Notice the gap between the Waz scepter and the sistrum crotalum. I started my analysis of the Hathor sistrum crotalum by collecting up as many examples as I could find, of which I found plenty. I assumed there must be an electric battery somewhere in the handle of the device. That much was a given. So I focused my attention on the strange box on Hathor's head. The first thing I noticed were the spiral components located on the sides of the box. That was the electrical point of contact with the Waz scepter, and apparently with the horns of the solar headdress as well. So I figured they must be a pair of spring metal contacts. The second thing I noticed were the snakes located inside the box. I noticed they were cobras, and I thought, what does a cobra do? It coils. So I figured the box contained an induction coil that could magnetically attract the spring metal contacts on the sides of the box, which combined with the battery located in the handle of the device and the Waz scepter switch held by the priestess created a simple electric buzzer that could power a solar headdress and light the plasma bulb. In 2000, I constructed a working model of the device, which consisted of a battery, an induction coil with spring metal contacts, and a Waz scepter. Here, I have set up a demonstration of the device with a model of the sistrum crotalum consisting of a battery, an induction coil with spring metal contacts, a Waz scepter, a small neon plasma bulb, and a voltmeter to measure the voltages across the bulb. In this short video, I demonstrate the function of the sistrum crotalum and Waz scepter. The video is about a minute and a half. Of energy can be interpreted technically as vibrating electromagnetic contacts and simple batteries. This information also allowed me to identify other ancient electrical devices found in Egypt, like the giant Mdu necklace machine we saw earlier, powered by 4 large sistrum crotalums, or these even larger examples found at Dendera, with 2 kneeling technicians giving us a sense of the scale of these devices quite large enough to power the Dendera Light and solve the power source puzzle. A Dendera Light with power source. Here I've compiled a graphic of a typical Dendera Light along with its power source, showing the components to scale. The components are a typical Dendera Light, 6 large 30-foot tall sistrum crotalum high voltage devices, with 2 kneeling technicians apparently tending the device, while another is shown manning a station high above. In Egypt, these technicians are referred to as the Hay. This particular Hay, shown above, has a special purpose. Here we see him holding a solar disk above his head with 2 staffs, where the staffs are suggestive of an energy flow. This plasma device serves a very important function in this circuit. In any large electric device, such as a sistrum crotalum, there are electric switches consisting of metal contacts. These metal contacts can be seriously damaged by the high voltage electric arcs generated by these devices, and steps must be taken to protect them somehow. This problem is resolved today by an electrical component called a GDT, or gas discharge tube, a compact high voltage plasma device very similar in construction to the solar disk plasma bulbs. These
Alright, now you heard an electrical technician's take. Again, if you just came in, we heard it from a mainstream archaeologist, and then we just listened to an electrical technician. I want to make one thing clear. When the archaeologist cited Wolfgang Wackes for translating the mural, he left out Wolfgang Wackes's translation of Hin in Hindu. We're going to go over these inscriptions later on in the presentation. We're also going to learn how to interpret figurative teachings. Figurative teachings aren't figurative just for the sake of it. Figurative teachings can still indicate physical objects. Before we get too far, I want everybody to pay attention to the fact that people have been rediscovering and discovering ways to generate and harness electricity. This is the large scale perspective of it, but I am going to go over the small scale perspective of it. As you can see, this timeline for rediscovering and discovering electricity is over 100 years old. It also should be known that energy harvesting from fruits such as avocados, oranges, is a well-established practice. I bring this up to say that if people at home can harness electricity from an avocado or something that exists in nature, what do you think the committee you were capable of? Here is a picture of a homemade battery. Those of you who are on TikTok, you see all the time the do-it-yourself videos about how to harness energy, and they're doing this for a reason. The reason is because there is a looming energy crisis. I also want to point out that hydrovoltaic energy harvesting has been rediscovered. It predates the modern era, and I want you to keep this in mind. As we know, the serpent rises from the lotus flower. Keep that meaning in mind. Keep this practice in mind. Again, this is hydrovoltaic energy harvesting through lotus leaves. I want everyone to pay attention to the current timeline for the discovery of electricity. As it stands, this is the official narrative. This is definitely inaccurate, since we have a Greek starting the party off for the West. Anytime a Greek is the originator of anything, you know that it came from Kemet. That Greek got it from Kemet. This is the correct timeline for human discovery of atomic theory. First documentation of the atom is in the pyramid text. The Greek philosopher who is credited with proposing atomic theory got his teachings from the Shabaka stone. I just showed you the West timeline, which is a lie. I showed you a correct timeline that involves Africa, Kemet, and then the Greeks and then the Europeans. This is the one that is strictly African. This is Africa's quest from Atum to Electrum. One thing that I want to make known, that for both Kemet and the Europeans, it took approximately 2,000 years for each to go from the discovery of atoms to harnessing electricity. So keep that in mind. If it's feasible for the Europeans, it's definitely feasible for Africans. Like I said before, we are going to go over the writing that is on the wall. But I want it to be known that there is Mdu Ntchr language that indicates electricity harnessing in Kemet. If you have been studying Mdu Ntchr, you should know that there is plenty of language that expresses electromagnetism. Everyone knows about the jet. Some people know about electrum. Again, a recognizable feature of the variations of expressing electrum is a scepter with a serpent. So this is why you see a serpent rising from the lotus flower. It's just not there for entertainment and mythology. The mythology has meaning. Just because it's mythological doesn't mean it doesn't mean anything. Here is a outline of Mdu Ntchr language that proves the use of electricity. I will leave it here so you can indirectly take note of it. Here is Jed and Sistrum. If you were here earlier and paying attention, you know the electrical technician mentioned the Sistrum. course, before we get into the details of the Dendera Light, we definitely need to know who Hersham Tawi is. His Hellenistic renaming is Harsomtus, but we know him as Hersham Tawi. According to basic academic references, they admit that Hersham Tawi is primordial and has many forms. You can see him rising from the lotus flower, or on top of the lotus flower. We are actually going to visit Egyptologists and what they say about Hersham Tawi. This is an academic text. It is called the Temple of Dendera. This is from volume 6 through 8. He tells us that Hersham Tawi has two forms. As you can see, Hersham Tawi is primordial, and this is according to Egyptologists. There is academia on the Dendera Temple by Egyptologists. They do have useful information, but they will not go into discerning the physicality of the scene. They will not bother to explore what electrical engineers say and their experiments. Again, Hersham Tawi has a falcon form, which represents the day or the sun, and he has a serpent rising from the lotus, which is primordial or electromagnetic. This is important to remember the cosmic origins that come from our ancestors. They involve Mdu, Hersham Tawi in his primordial form, and then him in his falcon form. And this is parallel to the Big Bang Theory, because with Mdu you have the black hole, with Hersham Tawi in serpent form, you have electrons and light particles. When Hersham Tawi becomes a falcon in Big Bang, you have the sun and the stars. Dave Francis. He has his own channel. You should check it out when you get time. We will be moving on to Hay. If you were paying attention earlier, Hay was brought up by the electrical technician. I want everybody to pay attention to the meaning of hay. I want everybody to pay attention to the parallels between hay and gas discharge tubes. Again, the electrical technician brought this up in his presentation, so I am going to, of course, reinforce it. I want it to also be known that a scholar who brings forth falsifiable evidence is better than a scholar who arbitrarily brings forth a conclusion and doesn't pay attention to the ones who brought forth the experimental and practical evidence. While I was talking, if you paid attention to the parallels between hay and the gas discharge tubes, hay represents infinity, and so does the gas discharge tube. They have the parallel functions between them, so I want everybody to take mental note of that. I want Ka to also be known. I want to reinforce Ka. Ka is the divine spark. So when Ka is mentioned in conjunction with a depiction of what obviously looks like a light bulb, now things start to formulate. We know how to understand our Mdu ancestors. Now we're finally here. We're getting to the meat and potatoes, but before we do, I want everybody to look at this beautiful city that was known as Ayunet. Ayunet is the Kemetic name for what is called Dendera. Ayunet was a city for technology, a hub for technology. I want it to be known that only a few academic resources talk about Dendera in its entirety, and even less academic resources and references on the World Wide Web talk about the Dendera Light. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward through this presentation. Once again, if you are a Kemetic enthusiast, if you're familiar with Kemet in general, you should be familiar with certain pictorials from the Mdu Ntchr language, the Mdu Ntchr language. Some symbols that you should recognize right off the bat without having to have a proficient knowledge or a trained knowledge of the script. We recognize the falcon. We recognize the flagpole. In the second column, again, let me start over. When you read hieroglyphics, if you're new to this, you start on the right side and then you read towards the left side. So again, everyone should know Haru. Everyone should recognize the flagpole. Everyone should recognize the encircled X. Some people are aware of Ba, but you get my point. And the translations for this is available on the World Wide Web, so you do not have to know hieroglyphics to understand what this is. What we're looking at now is a makeshift translation that I made up and came up with earlier based on what I could remember first off, but that was highly unnecessary. I'm just showing you that you should have familiarity with certain pictorials so you have a grasp on what you're looking at. But again, here we are with Wikipedia. A lot of people hate Wikipedia. I don't know why. It is an academic resource. Many of the articles are well cited on Wikipedia, so even if you don't like Wikipedia, you can just go straight to the reference that they're citing and then investigate it. But anyway, these translations are based on Wolfgang Watticus, or Wolfgang Wattis. I'm going to let you read them. We already went over the meaning of hey. Words spoken by Herson Tawi, the great Ntchr, who dwells in Dendera or Ayunet, who is in the arms of those at the prow in the Maskedet barge, noble cobra, under whose Kinti statue is Hay, whose crew carries the holiness of his perfection, whose Ba caused the rising woman to rise in the sky. Again, they're talking about rising. So these are figurative. They're explaining what we see through figurative teaching. Africans have always been figurative. We're figurative in our speech right now. One prime example is when we hear the phrase, black people ain't got no culture. That's not literally saying that black people are without culture. That's just a figurative way of saying that we need to clean up our culture. Just like you can figuratively tell somebody that they need to gain access to more money by saying that they don't have any money. So figurative speech has always been utilized among the black race. I want you to look at these translations because I want you to pull out what archaeologists and Egyptologists fail to. And again, at the very bottom, you have materials. I'm here to tell you these materials are not the statues. When you review the crypts, you find that there's 12 crypts. And out of the 12 crypts, only one of the 12 crypts held statues. The other 11 held objects. So we need to keep that in mind. When we investigate issues like this, we are not looking for smoking guns. Again, we are following a prima facie method. If you are unfamiliar with that term, all that means is we're building a case to get us into court, and we have that evidence. Now, if you remember what the archaeologist said, he only said the bark in the depiction was physical. And the people, he pretty much said everything was physical except for the light. That's weird. And that's incorrect. That's blatantly incorrect. You can't have a drawing where all the things are real in it except for one thing. Especially when you read what the text is actually saying. Hey is not physical. Ba is not physical. We just learned that Persimtawi is not physical. So how can it be everything except for only the light is physical? So let's break it down. What we know thus far is that the mural dates back to 50 BC, 50 BCE. And we know that the inscription is describing a physical object. We have the lotus flower. We already found out that lotus leaves can harness electricity. We have Persimtawi depicted as the primary primordial serpent, right? Or the filament. We have the Ka. The Ka is providing the spark. And we have the two variations of the lights. We have the jet and we have hay. I want to point something out before I go over a hint. This is from two Egyptologists. This comes from an academic journal. One is from a French archaeological institute. The first interpretation or translation is from 1982, and it says that Hin is a physical covering, a transparent covering. So right off the bat, that's physical. When we say Hin, when the Comedy U talks about Hin or Hindu, that is a covering, depending on the context of the other writings and what they're depicting. That was in 1982 with that translation. 20 years later, it gets updated to mean the same thing. So there's no discrepancy with Hin and Hindu meaning a physical container that's transparent. So now let's go back to what the Comedy U is telling us. The hen or the henu is a transparent container. So I'm going to leave this up here so you can take a look at it. If you need to take a screenshot, go ahead. The symbolic meaning of the Dendera Light. I want everybody to pay attention to this. I will leave this here before I go over it. Take screenshots. So again, the session or the lotus is the primal source of illumination. Harsem Tawi is the primordial essence that existed before the sun. Remember, we looked at the cosmology. Harsem Tawi is light. He is electromagnetic. Ba, the individual, the nature, the soul. Ka is the divine spark, the life force. He is infinity. Jed is stability. We also have Ak in the equation. Ak emerges from the union of Ka and Ba, and it obviously is related to light, brilliance. I want to go over the parallels of the Jed. Everyone should be familiar with this. If not, here it is. The Jed serve as a formula for direct current. And as you can see, it looks like the pennies that were stacked with an electrolyte and pieces of zinc to make homemade batteries. So we know the ancient Egyptians, or better yet, the Kemetic harnessed electricity. No question with that. I want to take a look again at Hay to show you the parallels between Hay and modern electronic equipment. I want everybody to pay attention to what the Dendera actually looks like again. Electrical engineers looked at the mural and coined the term. Specifically, Austrian engineer coined the term. Not a conspiracy theorist, an engineer, a professional in the field, coined the name of Dendera Light. If you are familiar with the cathode ray light tube, this is how they made it. going to leave this here as well. Again, I'm breaking down the function as it relates to figurative Mdu Ntchr language. Your light source is lotus. Glass container is N. Source of spark is cotton. Your metal electrode is Tawi. Jed is the vacuum that stabilizes. And hay is the filler of the gas container. I want to go over books that cover the topic of the Dendera Light. Again, Egyptologists totally ignore the engineering falsifiable evidence that has been brought forth. Why they don't produce any falsifiable evidence on the Dendera Light. And when I mean they don't bring any falsifiable evidence forth for the Dendera Light, I mean they don't bring any falsifiable evidence forth to say that it's not a light. So we have to keep that in mind. This is why when you investigate, if you want to make use of AI, you really have to know what you're doing. I highly advise people to create standards of plausibility and prima facie instead of smoking guns. Smoking guns is not going to help you when you are faced with systematic oppression that started with looting temples and conspiring. I want everybody to pay attention to this conversation that I had with AI. At first glance, Grasa and Hayback, these are the authors of a book that I will be bringing up and discussing momentarily, but they have no academic credentials. Again, Grasa and Hayback have no academic credentials, but you have to ask, if they have no academic credentials, how are they better scholars than the Egyptologists who say that the Dendera Light is not light? Very simple. Grasa and Hayback did the experiment on behalf of the electrical engineer. So, because they did a physical experiment and brought forth falsifiable evidence, in addition to the fact that this is entirely ignored by Egyptologists, we have to say that Grasa and Hayback, who have no academic or Egyptologist background, are better scholars than Egyptologists on the matter. So, I want to get into some scholarship and some scholars. I want to reinforce the magnitude of stolen legacy. I reinforced this in the telescopes and Kemet presentation. I will do it again because when you work on the standard of prima facie, you have to let it be known that there is a conspiracy. You are piecing together evidence to build a case. So this is stolen legacy. It lets us know that the Greek learned from Kemet and later failed to give credit to Kemet. So when you see Greeks and Europeans taking credit for technology, this is where they get it from. They got it from Kemet. Second book This is a very important book. This is a little known book. This is by African Creation Energy. This book is called Pata Technology. I will leave it here so you can take screenshots, take note of it. It literally teaches how to harness electricity the homemade way. They were teaching the black race how to build homemade batteries 10 years ago. This book is approximately 10 years old. It may be older, but this is definitely a book that you want to get your hands on. And it definitely talks about the Dendera Light. It breaks it down the same way I did. I want to also make note of the light of the Pharaoh. Now, before I justify why these scholars are better than Egyptologists, although they are they work in the pseudo and paranormal field, the reason why these scholars are better than Egyptologists on the matter of the Dendera Light is because, once again, they did the experiment with a professional expert. They utilized a professional expert to reconstruct what was being shown on the walls. And now we're here. And again, I want to reinforce this. When you are oppressed and you're dealing with conspiracy and you are subject to conspiracy, you cannot look for smoking guns. You have to use plausibility, and again, prima facie. Who gets ignored? Egyptologists ignore electrical engineers and their practical experiments based on the Dendera Light mirror. Again, this engineer's name is Walter Garn. He is the one who is correctly credited for coining the term Dendera Light, not a fringe author, an electrical engineer. Only in this case do the fringe authors and pseudo-authors and paranormal authors get credit because they went to practicality to prove that the Dendera Light is actually what we see. So with this experiment, we now have what's called quack like a duck. Initially, it's being called a duck. We go to the mirror, we look to see that it looks like a duck, and now here we are with Walter Garn telling us that it quacks like a duck. Case closed. So that concludes the presentation. Again, I want it to be known that STEM is very important. STEM is what's going to liberate us. Technology is what's going to liberate us. So we cannot ignore all of the STEM that comes out of Kemet or any African civilization for that matter. We just learned how to interpret the glyphs and how to recognize that figurative speech can provide instructions for physical objects. there are any comments, questions, or concerns, please feel free to leave them in the chat. I will drop the link. What's up, family?
What's up?
What's going on, man?
That was an interesting presentation.
I appreciate it, bro.
This is the kind of presentation that I can respect. That might put me on the side that it was actually a light. There was actually some electrical energy transfer going on.
Right.
Because people just talk.
It's just so many things that we overlook because we so stuck on smoking guns. But we can't rely on smoking guns if people are running conspiracy on us and they looted our temples.
I'll say this. I'll say this. So I do think that based on the use of gold and other precious metals, in what they call sacred objects, they definitely had some idea of the energy transfer of it. Because a lot of objects that the priests used were made of electrum, which I learned was gold and silver. But it was inlaid in like wooden boxes and different things of that sort. So they definitely knew something about it. It was definitely something that was used in sacred objects. They describe it in the text. Am I correct?
Right. Definitely. A lot of people, when they critique, and this is just on the internet, they overlook the object part, the material description part. That's only one little small facet of that, and they overlook how many crypts there are and what was actually stored in the crypts.
Yeah, because they definitely use a lot in the spiritual world in Kemet. They definitely use a lot of gold objects. For real. Definitely.
Right.
So we know that they knew it carried some kind of energy. Even some of the pyramids were capped with gold capstones. And they stole those and went with them. So we know that.
Right.
There's definitely some energy transfer. Now, was it a battery? I don't know. I don't want to doubt it. But it seemed like there was some rudimentary understanding of at least spiritual energy, if not electrical energy. And gold is the best conductor of electrical energy, if I'm not mistaken. And silver. So they definitely knew something about that.
Right.
So I do appreciate the presentation. It is very interesting. Unfortunately, I wish I could have read the text more and had more knowledge of the Mdu Ntchr.
Yeah, it's not that hard, bro. Like I just went over, you should be familiar with at least some pictorials. There was a lot of familiar pictorials in that stele or in that mural. So that I'm not saying that means that you should be able to read the whole entire stele, but you know what I mean. You know if you recognize certain symbols and you know the figurative language, you know the meanings. You know right now.
But that really showed you would have been the younger form of Heru, that's all?
Correct. Yeah, because remember they're talking about primordial. Let me go back to that real quick for you.
Because I could look at it and tell by the way they presented him, he was a youth.
Right.
Because he looked very young and he had the little side block and everything on it.
Right. But if you can see, as you can see, I should have put another picture of Herson Tawi on the left side, but you can see him if in his primordial form, he's electromagnetic.
Now here's what I will say: when people start to use certain words like electromagnetic is when they start to get into the particles and the subatomic, then I think people put an extra sauce on it. I don't know if they would have necessarily seen it that way. I know that they definitely, because I got an article about it stating that they recognize that like Newt and Geb and these things were description of the galaxy. I definitely got a paper on that. But
Yeah,
I don't
definitely.
know if they would have seen it from a subatomic level as we would have had that type of understanding.
Right.
I haven't seen any text to say that specifically. I do believe that
Brother Hercules knows about
devices.
this.
I do believe that they have magnifying devices. I'll say that. I think that they did. But, I don't know how they would have described that in their text to describe something that small. I don't know how they would have described it. So that's my
Hercules, if you in the chat, if you still watching, come up, man. Hit the link, bro. You don't got to be long. I'm going to conclude this probably within the next 10 minutes if we don't get any more people to come.
I do appreciate the work that you put into that. And
yeah, definitely, man.
I definitely think that we need to review it and break it down a little further. And we definitely need to get King Herc in there to put his mathematical spin on it. So we need to get
definitely, man. STEM is important to the point to where we cannot dismiss certain things based on what Egyptology say or Egyptologists say.
But you know what get me mad, boy? People like to come on here with their fake understanding of Mdu Ntchr and confuse the issue. Because I saw that debate with Jabari and Inky. And Inky wasn't doing too well with the Mdu Ntchr at all.
Right.
He was switching the Mdu Ntchr hard, but he was pronouncing it when and never. Don't pronounce it that way. I don't understand.
Yeah, I put this link in I put this link in a couple people's back chat, so hopefully it gets up to at least 50 views before I wake up in the morning. I know that's kind of far-fetched because I'm fresh on here. I'm just now getting started.
Well, listen, I'll tell you this. You get good views on my platform, bro. I think the last video I posted got about 100 views.
Okay, nice.
So you get very good views. So it's not that the content is not good.
Right. I appreciate that, man.
No. It's helping me too. Because it's getting good.
Right.
Views. And I know what it's like when you went, because last time I had about 20 subscribers. Now I'm up to almost 150. So that's an achievement. So I know how it feels. So I'm not gonna. So if I can help you, why not? Because somebody help you too. And it's good information.
Okay.
I don't want it to go to waste.
Right.
So I did my promoted page Tuesday today. But
yeah, I seen that.
Yeah, and I could have just waited. I really could have just waited.
Right,
so
right.
what I'm gonna do is maybe tomorrow or Thursday we'll go over it and see if we can get Hercules to come in.
Yeah, to be honest with you, tomorrow's better because I got plans Thursday.
All right, I'll text you tomorrow and we'll do it. I'll see if I can get in contact with King Herc to come through and put his mathematical spin on it. So keep doing what you're doing, bro. Don't give up. You'll probably reach the monetization faster than me.
That's what's up, man. I appreciate the words, man.
Bro, you're a good brother. Everybody like, share, and subscribe to the brother's platform. He has good information. You have a good night and keep pressing forward, eh?
All right, hold up, bro.
Hold up, my brother.
Hold up, family. I'm going to close out. Don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. Definitely, if you can see the Cash App QR code on the top left, please access that as well. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to leave them in the live chat. Or if you're watching after the live stream, leave them in the comment section. Again, I'm going to be closing out soon. I hope you learned something. I think it's really important to establish a new methodology when studying history. We do not rely on smoking guns for every single thing. The method of telling African history and proving African history is different from what the Europeans do. So I'm going to close out momentarily, but in the meanwhile, I will leave you listening to the war drums for a few minutes before I end the live stream. Again, hit the like, share, and subscribe button, and donate as well to Cash App.